Yo, what's up guys? Public Ally here. Here with my first Pee-wee video. Really wanted to make a guide for this build that I've been playing this league and past few leagues, kind of tweaking it to my liking. I would say that, there's quite a demand I think right now, especially with the incoming player base, newer player base anyways, and even some returners that are still maybe consider themselves fairly new. There's a need for budget builds right now, I feel like, and I feel like this one fills that niche quite well, as well as being fairly easy to play, fairly easy to gear, and I would say really the only expensive item that you're really probably going to need is the 6 link. The only unique this uses the Warp Timepiece, Time Class Moonstone Ring, Dream Fragments, and Belted Deceiver. Now, if you had an infinite amount of money, there's a setup that you can do with a Comb's Heart and a Pledge of Hands. But I'm a real big fan of Shield Charge and being able to generate 4 to 5 pretty easily, so I'm staying with this one and kind of keeping it budget because, I don't know, it's really just preference. So, starting off, the reason that we do go FireStorm is because, one, you get it early, so you can kind of play it from the beginning. Which is always nice, and it gives you a nice sense of really kind of leveling up and improving, and you really get to see how the skill changes. And there's honestly just a lot of links that function real well with Firestorm. So currently what I'm doing is Concentrated Effect with Controlled Destruction and Fire Pen, and then we use Mana Leech and Life Leech to support it in our 6th link. I swap out faster casting for conk effect whenever I run less area maps. Another big reason why I like Firestorm is because after the AoE nerfs plus the added less area modifier on maps, it really made stuff feel pretty bad. But the good thing about Firestorm is because it's mechanically quite strong, in my opinion, is when you do sacrifice AoE for this skill, you're actually gaining a level of single target. So you can, if you want. It's kind of hard to do, you know, mechanically or without RNG, but if you can get like less area and like double unique bosses on a map like Racecourse, makes it pretty easy to farm the bosses and quite safe, as you'll see. So as you'll see that my life pool is not that high for softcore. I probably could get it a little bit higher. But what I decided to do was to do a dual curse effectiveness setup by getting Whispers of Doom, obviously, as well as getting the curse effectiveness here, curse effectiveness here, as well as getting, let's see, 20% quality on the Blasphemy for a total of 40% curse effectiveness. And obviously one of the biggest issues with LE builds is being able to get enough elemental penetration. That's why for the longest time you've pretty much seen any elemental build try to go crit so they can go Inquisitor. And while that may be fun and I enjoy Inquisitor, there's a level of inconsistency with crit builds, especially after the crit chance nerfs. And so I really just wanted to do an easy, cheap budget, simple, fun to play build to start a league. This is obviously softcore viable, obviously hardcore viable with some tweaks and maybe a little bit more life. But as you see right now for dual cursing, we use flammability. So let's see, on here right now it has 44% fire pen. So that's increased by 40%. So that's close to 60 or so pen from this. Mathematicians in the chat can give the exact number, but it just feels good fire pen there. And then for defense we use Enfeeble, quality of course, for all the extra reduced stats. This makes having a lower life pool feel a lot safer. I definitely don't die very often. if at all, anymore, even in softcore with this setup. Now, I do have Elite Weakness also in the link as well, so if you're running just a really easy map, or you're not really too worried about dying and losing XP, you can drop Enfeeble for Elite Weakness and Flammability for just redonkulous damage. But I hate dying. It's just kind of frustrating. So I run Enfeeble even in softcore. It just feels better. Now, to manage what I would say are the typical aspects that you would need to deal with in PoE, such as freeze and chill, we take care of very easily and cheaply with dream fragments. Temporal chains is kind of annoying, so it's nice to have this. Plus, it also gives attack speed and cast speed and a little mana regen. I use a warp timepiece because, well, I needed the dex, plus the attack speed, cast speed, and boost speed, and I wanted the increased life leached and mana leached because we're not pathing to get Val Pact. Reduced skill effect duration is not that big of a deal because you can get a Belt Implicit to kind of make 4 up here with the Belted Deceiver. Yeah, the reason we go this is because, well, the reduced extra crit chance is nice for defense. All res is nice and makes it easy to get your Wise Oak Flask set up, which I'll talk about in a second. And also nearby enemies are intimidated, which makes everything around you take 10% increased damage. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe because it's a separate increased modifier, this actually acts as 10% more damage to anything around you, but let me know, veterans in the chat, if I'm wrong about that. So moving on to Ascendancy, obviously we're going Witch, we're non-crit. We go the standard Pendulum of Destruction into Mastermind of Discord, then grabbing Paragon of Calamity or Shaper of Desolation. It's really up to you which one you want to take first. I mean, they have the new Paragon system, which does have the reduced reflect on it, which you're going to take anyways. So getting this and pretty much being full Ellie immune, or full reflect immune is really nice. Shaper of Desolation, we don't run Ellie Focus. I used to run that. I used to run Ellie Focus instead of Controlled Destruction and ran double golems, but they die all the time from fizz damage, even with the full Ellie immunity, and they were just frustrating to stack. Even though it was, you can run 2 lightning golems and get pretty good amount of cast speed and attack speed, but they just died halfway through a map, and you just weren't really getting that much of a Liege of Primordial. So instead I went with Shaper of Desolation and dropped Ellie Focus, and although the ignites aren't really that big, just having that little bit of chill and shock ignite once in a while helps out with the DPS. And the other thing that's really important, probably the biggest aspect I'd say of Elementalist is this right here. Because this build, as you can see, uses Val Lightning Trap to help with single target, and you can use it for the Harbinger pack since they tend to spawn them all around the same area. And we use Orb of Storms to proc Ellie Overload on our tree. Combines really well with Mastermind of Discord to get that fire pin in the past 10 seconds, excuse me, when you use a lightning skill. So you get that 25 pin plus keeping up Ellie Overload with these 2 skills. Makes it just feel really smooth, and especially once you get enough cast speed. I mean, this pretty much comes out immediately. And then obviously we use Shield Charge, pretty standard. I guess I'll go ahead and show you my links. Put faster casting in here. You could do increased AoE if you wanted to make the Shield Charge hitbox a little bit bigger to make Shield Charge easier to proc fortify, but since I kind of play this and I recommend playing this build really as a melee build, which I'll run a map here in a second, or part of one, just to kind of show you. And then for other gear, I really recommend trying to get a Sandbar Scepter as your base to craft on. Luckily I found this one pretty good and was able to buy it for like 1520C. This is really close to as perfect as I can think I guess that, the tiered rolls could be better, and the flat lightning damage doesn't do anything for me, but the damage penetrates 6% as the implicit is just really strong for non-crit builds. But I mean, if you're on a budget, you don't have to get all these good stats. The attack speed is not necessary unless you just want to move around faster with shield charge, but I did have the money at one point to make an upgrade. So pretty much what you just want to do is get life and res on all your rear gear. Obviously pretty standard. You're probably gonna need to get some dex on some of your gear so that you can use a higher level faster attacks, higher level mana leech, and I believe Val Lightning Trap also has a dex requirement. For a shield, it's kind of up to you. I went with the all res implicit mosaic. Honestly, it's kind of just what I found, but it worked out. Pretty much you just want to get cast speed, life, armor. You can do an energy shield one. I just prefer to have armor since it pretty much plays like a melee build. So cast speed and life on this, on your shield, is usually the most important. important. And then for helmet, obviously you can get a Firestorm, enchant. That's great. I just haven't been farming Uber Lab enough to get lucky enough, but just life, armor, any res you need on your helmet is good. Same with gloves. I chose to get a nice dex roll on here so I can use my green gems. And then for flask, I don't know, I guess I like to run 2 life flasks. You don't have to, but because I do choose to farm race courses and I like to fight the bosses, it's nice to have the little bit of extra life to fight them through. You could have curse immunity on one of your flasks, especially one of your greens. Or utility flask, so it's up permanently, but because I have a curse, or because I have silence immunity here, and I have a little bit of temporal chain reduction here, it's not that big of a deal. And I've run into a few times dying in softcore to my bleed flask being it down and actually dying to either corrupting blood or a big bleed, so just having 2 makes it nicer, but you could you could do something else like move speed or curse effectiveness. And obviously Wise Oak, a pretty standard flask for really any elemental build, especially non-crit. Now this is one of the harder things to do. Not harder, it's just doing a little math and finding the right gear, but it's probably a lot easier right now with the saturation of items in the league. But trying to get all your reses overcapped the same really gives you a lot of defense from this flask. Now, obviously, you really only need to penetrate fire because we're not really using any other damage type. But it makes this flask just significantly more stronger in the defense department when you can get reduced damage to all res. Chaos res could be higher, but I'm not running Overground Shrine or whatever that tier 15 is, and I just don't know, I don't run into enough scenarios where chaos is that big of a problem. I guess if you wanted to, you could run the Aziri's Flask for the extra leech and chaos damage, and it gives you some chaos res, but it doesn't seem to be a priority for me at the moment. So yeah, that's pretty much the setup. Again, really, you don't need any of this for it to work. Firestorm is just mechanically a very solid overall skill. I just get these because, well, they're cheap uniques, except for getting this was like maybe 5C because of the implicit, but it's probably cheaper now. These are all under a C. They buffed Dream Fragments, if I'm not mistaken. This used to be only cannot be frozen, but they added cannot be chilled, which is just... I don't know how this ring is this cheap right now. I guess maybe because ES is not very popular, and people usually run chill freeze removal on a flask, but I don't know, maybe because of the new mobs they've added to the maps, I just feel like there's so much freeze and chill now. I feel like this is just a godsend for any build that can, fit it in and doesn't need like flat fizz or something on rings. So yeah, that is pretty much the setup. Really, I guess the kind of final few notes while I I make a map here is that it's fun, it's fast, it's very budget friendly, and you know, it really kind of plays almost like a melee build in a sense, as you'll see here in a second. And you know, we also get unwavering stance to deal with stun. I guess that's good to point out. We do pass down here because I wanted to get the increased life leech since we're not obviously able to get over here to Valpact. Plus I wanted to get this node since any percentage physical damage reduction is nice when you're stacking it with any level of armor. And then just grab these nodes. Honestly, I could drop this, but for some life, but I don't mind. It's nice to be overcapped on cursed reses. It's a pretty standard tree. You don't have to get the skill duration, but it adds like this adds like almost another second of FireStorm being out, which really helps finishing off packs and lets you stack more on single targets, so we grab that. But everything else is pretty standard, I feel like, when it comes to pathing. I don't get these two area of effect nodes because the Ascendancy rotates with Pendulum of Destruction, so you do get a level of increased every once in a while. And you know, like I said, too much AoE on FireStorm makes a single target feel bad, which is why I run even Conk Effect standard and only swap it out for faster casting when I'm running a less area of effect map. Let's see, anything else about the tree? Get this, obviously, is really nice. Attack, cast speed, you use all of it. The dex is really important. You're gonna need that for a few gems for the dex requirement. I mean, really standard Curse Silence, you know, on any jewel for any spellcaster is, I would say, mandatory, because then you can kind of get away with not having to use a Curse Immunity Flask. Life Chaos Res, standard Explosive Impact Circle, obviously Elliot Overload is quite important. You know, get most of the life wheel. And one other final point I guess I'd like to say about this build, and well, you know, really, I guess most builds in general, especially if you're somebody that's new, following a guide, trying to figure out PoE because there's so much to learn, is that when you're presented with a guide like this and somebody's, you know, showing you that it can work, get up to this point, you know, where you can, I've literally been able to sustain these flasks, build up a nice, you know, map pool. All of these I didn't buy, none of these I've bought, mainly just by, you know, anytime I get a 20 quant plus 80 quant plus 20 plus pack size map, pretty much run bloodlines on it if it's a tier 10, tier 11 plus, and even, you know, if you have any, you know, sort of luck, you're gonna be able to maintain currency. Because even though I like to play in trade leagues, God forbid, the API is so bad right now that it's really difficult to trade for certain things. And so I try to play as self-sustained as possible until I really, you know, have to trade, which is really another benefit of this build, is that you really don't need any of these gear pieces for it to work. It's just supplementary and makes it a little bit easier to gear and to manage. So yeah, just, you know, be careful that, you know, when you follow a build guide, whether it's mine or somebody else's, that you don't have to be super strict on the tree. You know, if you feel like something else is a little bit better than this, then you know, by all means do that. I used to follow some players' guides, and I would get to level 85 plus, and wow, you know, I really don't like this cluster of you know, skill points, so let me get rid of these here, and oh hey, it feels better. But you know, at the end of the day, it's really just preference, which I think is one of the best things about this game, is well, the level of build diversity. Even though some people would argue right now maybe it's not so much, but I feel like PoE's in a pretty good spot. I guess there's always things that, you know, maybe need to be maybe need to be mentioned, but you know, that's just part of gaming. So as you can see, we pretty much just play like a melee build. And even with 42% moral life, I wanted to run like an enfeebler life just to show you, you know, that even with the technically, I guess, reduced damage, it still clears pretty well. The downside about using Unwavering Stance, I believe, is that you don't get any effect of the Enfeeble's reduced accuracy on enemies, but because I have so much mitigation, and they play like melee, I really felt like getting Unwavering Stance, even utilizing Enfeeble, was worth it. So although you see you do get hit from stuff like this, the damage reduction is pretty good. Even though there's only, I guess there's only one damage amount on the map, but I'm not playing any other builds right now at this league. This has been my only one. Really just wanted to focus on getting the getting all my maps nice and clean. Get a nice atlas. I think I'm at like 89 right now. Could be better, but I've just been trying to optimize this build. I've really been enjoying it. I know some people get bored. Some people definitely get bored of FireStorm because everybody uses it early on. But I mean, it's just mechanically a very sound skill, and I don't know, I thoroughly enjoy it. Oh yeah, one more thing I forgot to note, I guess, while we're finishing this map up is that, and sorry this video is kind of long, I tend to ramble. I'm a fast talker, but I don't have any notes. I kind of just did this off the cuff. So good thing I thought about this. I used to use, instead of Enfeeble, I used to use Warlord's Mark. And as you know, I use Mana Leech and Life Leech now. And the reason being is that, well, Enfeeble is just really strong defensive setup when you have Curse Effect in this. But also, I didn't, because we're not using a Cosprey's Will, which, you know, unless you can get the off-course for it, it'd be pretty hard to use with this build, but possible. It'd be possible. I didn't like the fact that my Leech was a little inconsistent on mobs that had Hexproof. And I really liked the idea of being able to leech even when stuff wasn't cursed. And so I really tried to make this work. You know, one thing I value, especially in this game, is consistency above pretty much everything else. Obviously, tooltip is important. You know, you need to be able to do damage. But, you know, another thing I like, you know, non-crit builds is it's pretty consistent. You know, your damage is pretty much going to be the same throughout. And having the consistent leech really makes it feel more comfortable, in my opinion. Oh wow, look at all those rewards. There's something down here. Oh, I did. So I'll get to the boss here in a second, and I'll show you. Race Course boss, I've died to it before quite a few times. Just trying to figure out the mechanics because it's nothing to use Portal Gem. It's just, I love using Portal Gem, especially if you can fit it in. You have a lot of cast speed on your build. I have 2 fast recastings on there, even though it doesn't work, but I use that for my swap out. The reason I like Race Course, especially right now, I think a lot of people are liking it. You know, Strands got nerfed, and this has the advantage of having a triple boss, which, you know, I don't have any tier 12s unlocked, so whenever I do get just a +1, it's always going to be, it's always just going to be a Race Course, so that makes it a lot easier to maintain. Because anytime you get a 0 or a +1 in here, it's going to be a Race Course. Again, everything's preference, but I just like being able to, you know, maintain the map that I want to run long term, and so that's why I chose to do race course. It feels really good. 3 bosses, you know, it gives you a good chance of getting +2s. So if you do have any shaped tier 13s, I have Tropical Island and Cemetery. You can see here. I get all of these from, you know, the race course bosses when I do get +2, and then I use the orbs to. I've done a few tier 15s. Whenever I get a tier 15 drop like Core or Abyss that I've already done, you know, I just use the annulment shard and turn it into a tier 16. I guess that's the most profitable way to use annulment shards anyway, so that's kind of what I'm doing. But wow, this video has been a lot longer than I was expecting. So thanks for listening to my ramble. If you did, I might make a timestamp if this since this video is kind of long, but it's my first one for making them build guides. So hope you enjoyed me going over this easy Elementalist FireStorm build, and maybe I'll see you with another video. Take care, guys, and always remember, keep playing Path of Exile.